Good afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to the latest episode here at Up the Cherries in all departments of cherry picking. So, I have got two men with me. You can see them on the screen now. I have got Mr. Samuel Harrison. How you doing, Sam?
I'm good, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, all good, mate. And just below me, I have got Manny. He's back. How you doing, mate?
Mr. Beasley, Mr. Harrison, always a pleasure to be in your company. No complaints. Just before Christmas, just the tonic I need because, there are some streams which can get a little bit loud and rowdy at times. But when I come cherry picking, it is harmonious. It is peaceful. It's an absolute treat.
Definitely. That's what we like to be. That's what we like to be here at the Cherries in all departments. So let's cover off. We've done a couple of shows for the World Cup, and I did speak to Alejo, who, of course, is following. He's Argentinian. The eventual winners. But let's talk about that final firstly, because I've got to admit here, and Manny actually called it in one of our earlier shows. I didn't see Argentina after that defeat against Saudi Arabia doing anything at this World Cup, and they've gone and won it. Who wants to start? How good was that game?
I think, since I saw the whole game, I think I'll try and be brief and make it as much as a microcosm as I can. I'm glad I called it, really, because, I'm going to come to why. I also remember calling Thomas Tuchel becoming England manager. The less said about that, the better. FA, I'm calling you out. But what can I say? That final really was the culmination of a run of games which saw Argentina, after getting the kick up the backside they needed, go straight into knockout mode, really. Of course, if I don't know if I mentioned this, I think I did. I cited the example of the Spain team in 2010 who lost their first match to Switzerland but went on to win. And I think the advantage of losing a match like that, especially one you least expect, is because it sort of brings into focus the reality that you are one terrible result away from seeing your Copa America win, your 36-game unbeaten run, end up being all for nothing, really. And of course, by no small coincidence, it was 36 years since Argentina won their last World Cup, so maybe 36 might be their new lucky number. I don't know. But since that shock defeat, they went into knockout mode. It took a moment of Messi magic against Mexico to get them on their way. And obviously, I don't want to go into detail about the games they played prior to the final, but you could see that Messi set the ball rolling, everyone chipped in, and the difference between Messi's teams of yesteryears and this team of 2022 is that the supporting cast, many of them, if not all of them, stood up to be counted. And how? And the final was no different. I mean, tactically, it was good to see Scaloni go back to his 4-4-2 formation and make a really big call, which was the right call, to bring in Angel Di Maria for Leandro Paredes. Di Maria, of course, is on the right wing, but he somehow ended up moving all the way to the left wing, and they ended up giving Ousmane Dembele an absolute torrid time. He didn't give Jules Koundé any favours either. That was an inspired change, and that goal he scored following more Messi magic was just unbelievable. And Messi was, exerting his influence on the game. Mbappe was kept quiet. And tactically, those four people in the midfield, Di Maria, McAllister from Brighton, Enzo Fernandez, and Rodrigo de Paul, they were sort of choking the supply from Tchouameni and Rabiot all the way up to the attacking midfielders, and Giroud was becoming increasingly more isolated. Mbappe was, I would say, neutralized, for want of a better word. And although Griezmann did have his set pieces, he wasn't as influential. So that was a tactical masterclass at first from Scaloni, and Argentina were good value for their 2-0 halftime lead. And for 80 minutes, it was going so swimmingly. But one thing which irritates me so much about Lionel Scaloni and why I don't regard him as a good coach is because his game management is awful. Gentlemen, this is the third time in the tournament that with a 2-0 lead, they allowed themselves to be pulled back. Against Australia, they would have had the game taken to extra time had it not been for that clutch Emi Martinez save from Garang Kuol of Australia. In the quarterfinal, they were pulled back to 2-2 in normal time with two breathlessly late equalisers from the former Burnley striker Wout Weghorst. That last one coming in the 101st minute, mind you, 11th minute of stoppage time. And then they still managed to win on penalties. And now, I mean, after ripping apart Croatia, against France, I mean, in those last 10 minutes, they completely, just fluffed their lines again. More crazy play, more poor defending, more poor game management. And I was thinking deja vu all over again. I'll give them credit for recovering from that to start the extra time period in the more positive light and really, start taking the game to France with some chances of their own. France came back with chances of their own and could have also won it. When Messi stabbed that ball in with his wrong foot, which ended up being his right foot, in the right place at the right time, it was looking better. But then a handball, Mbappe scored again, his hat trick. Football, bleeding hell, eh?
Yeah.
And then it came to the penalties, and of course, more gamesmanship, for want of a better word, from the former Arsenal goalkeeper Emi Martinez. Saved well from Kingsley Coman, got into Tchouameni's head and saw him drag it wide. I think he got booked as well for his antics eventually. It was good to see the referee clamp down on that a bit. He sort of calmed down after that. But the Argentinians were nerveless with their penalties. They were as nerveless with their penalties as Hugo Lloris was quite frankly disappointing. And it ended in the most dramatic circumstances. Messi got his trophy, he got his golden ball, and he said that he's not going to end his international career, and I'm glad because I want to see him get 100 goals for Argentina. And so you could see throughout that match, throughout the campaign, we were put through the ringers. We saw the best of the team for the most part. We saw the worst of the team in a few parts. And I think going forward, if Lionel Scaloni is going to continue to enjoy more success with the Argentinian team, he has to start becoming tactically a lot more attacking. If you go into your shell like he did when he inexplicably took off Angel Di Maria and replaced him with Marcos Acuna, you're asking for trouble. I was expecting Nicolas Tagliafico to be replaced by Acuna, and Di Maria kept on because that would have really strengthened the attack. And I think Di Maria was in a good condition to play the whole 90 minutes. And if he had done that, you bring Paulo Dybala on for Julian Alvarez, maybe nick a third goal, 3-0, game over, uncork the champagne. But no, we just had to be put through the wars. But it was worth it. I mean, the quality of football at times was astounding. Mbappe was kept silent. He came to life near the end. And one reason why I'm glad that Argentina won is because in contrast to Messi, who was outstanding practically all tournament, and certainly consequential and pivotal to his team's performances, Mbappe would waver between sublime one match and silent the next.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have been just if such an inconsistent run of performances were to be rewarded with the golden ball. But he got the golden boot. He's only 23. He's got more World Cups in him. I think this might be the last of Deschamps as coach. But certainly France have this uncanny knack of, churning out quality players as if they were factory from a conveyor belt, you see. And I think France will return, but Argentina will obviously have the confidence on their side. They've got an excellent core of youth players. The only issue I have is that when Messi and Di Maria decide to retire, they shouldn't do it at the same time because a huge gap will be left in terms of leadership, experience, and proven quality. But what can I say? For all the controversy about whether Qatar should have hosted it, and I still believe, gentlemen, that we should never again have a December World Cup as a sort of an event which contained a sequence of fine football matches. It was unforgettable. And it's just a shame that we have to go back to life, back to the Premiership again, with no time to reflect on this. So I'm really, really glad I'm here to talk about this tournament with you, gentlemen.
No, definitely. And, it's always a pleasure to have you on. And to be honest, I can echo pretty much everything that you've said there. Just looking at Spain back in 2010, and it's interesting you do mention them. Of course, they got beat by Switzerland. They won 2-0 against Honduras, and 2-1. I believe it was Chile, wasn't it? But all of the knockout games, they won 1-0. And this has led me to think, I think they only scored 7 goals in the whole of the tournament. With regards to England and what we do, and of course, we put 6 past Iran, put 3 past Wales. The US game was a bit more difficult, but I think the US set up very well to play against us. Senegal scored 3 goals, and honestly, at that point, Senegal were no slouches. I thought we've got a chance here, but we come up against France, and there was that wonder goal, and it was a wonderful strike that set France on their way. But we just don't seem to be able to do it against the top teams. Now, I know that we beat Germany in the last Euros, but that's not the Germany that everybody remembers. It's a Germany that have gone out of this World Cup, and at one point were behind against Costa Rica, a side who Spain dispatched 7-0. So, what do you think, guys? How do we actually win games against these top teams? Because we tried it against France. We had 2 penalties. I don't exactly blame Harry Kane for missing his penalty. Would have been, I think if he had hit the target, he probably would have scored at that point. But at the same time, what do we do to actually change this? Because I think to win a World Cup, you're going to have to beat the best teams. And personally, after watching that game yesterday, could we have come back from 2-0 down? I don't think we could have.
Sam, you can take this. I've spoken enough for now.
For England, the team we've got, the attacking team we've got, we don't utilise it always enough. Like, I think the game against France, I wouldn't have had maybe 1 or 2 players on the pitch. I would have had 1 or 2 others.
Yeah.
But yeah, watching it yesterday, 2-0 down against Argentina, the way we play, I couldn't see us got back into that at all. I'm really puzzled with England at the moment. Like, for me, yeah, I would have a new manager myself. I think Gareth Southgate's done a good job. He has been very successful if you look at his standings compared to other managers. But I think to move forwards and to actually try and get something, I think we need a fresh look and get a new face in. The new face, I don't know who. I would like it to be kept as an English manager, but if we need to bring someone in from the rest of the world, then yeah, definitely I would bring someone in. But we've got the players there, that we've got the value of the players, as I think we had the most valuable team in the World Cup, I think they said. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they just need to perform a bit better under the right manager, I think.
I like the idea of Tuchel, and he's a very, very good manager. Does care about his players. Of course, Eddie is a man that we know all too well, and I think he would be an excellent England manager. I don't think, from what I understand, it's for him because he likes to be more hands-on. As we all know, when he was at Dean Court, he was the first one in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and the last one to leave.
Yeah.
Whereas the England job, he can't really do that. But we need to change things. And personally, I think we now need to look at the youth in the squad. We've got to look at the likes of Bellingham, Grealish. Grealish is one of the most talented players, skillfully, I would say, in the world, or could be at that level. Saka, an excellent player, absolutely fantastic player. I really do rate him. Harry Kane, had a very good game against France. Was a little bit missing for the other games. sometimes was a little bit disappointing. But against France, I seriously thought he had a good game. But I think we need to build something around those players that I mentioned there. If you look at the midfield that we've got, we have got Jude Bellingham, and some of the Liverpool fans who watch this channel might not agree with this. I don't want him to go there, and I'd rather he stays in Germany because I feel that his growth and his development will be better in Germany. What do you guys think of that?
There might be something to what you said there, Craig. And let's also not forget we had a certain Owen Hargreaves, Canada-born, played for Bayern Munich in Germany. He ended up becoming an England international and played for us in 2 World Cups. And, of course, from Bayern Munich, he made the move to Manchester United.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, he did do well for the Reds. It was disappointing, really, to hear Alex Ferguson not being so complimentary about him because, he played his part in the success of that club. And for Ferguson to have a go at several of his players later on, I mean, I'll get the point maybe, once you get to a certain age, you don't really give 2 flying figs and decide that, whatever's on your chest, you got to get it off and say what you want to say. But Hargreaves was a fine player. The danger with keeping the likes of Hargreaves and Bellingham in Germany, and I take your point, Craig, in saying that, the growth would be terrific, is that you can't really have a situation in some cases where, some of our best nationals do not play in a league which we don't really see and do not get the opportunity to interact with their future teammates, which is probably another reason why Jadon Sancho was snapped up by Manchester United as quickly as possible. Now, of course, Sancho didn't make the squad, and of late he has been going through some personal issues. I think I speak for all 3 of us when I say that I hope he overcomes those issues and goes on to have a better second phase in his career and starts coming back with a bang. But I wouldn't regret the idea of bringing him to the Premier League. And if Liverpool certainly want him, let's not forget that Liverpool do have a German manager of their own in Jurgen Klopp, who managed Borussia Dortmund, where Bellingham plays. So I'm pretty certain that with Klopp having brought elements of his Dortmund coaching days to Liverpool, he wouldn't have a problem integrating Bellingham into his team. And he'd certainly find some room for him. I think Bellingham will definitely enjoy being there. And let's not forget that as wonderful a World Cup as Jordan Henderson had, he is practically at the end of his international days. If memory serves me right, he's on 74 caps now. I would like to see him get a 75th, which is a nice, half round number, if you will. But his England days are done and dusted, and I don't know how long he's going to have at Liverpool. So obviously, if you want to have the heir apparent, why not bring in Henderson's England midfield teammate with whom they shared some chemistry? Yeah. It seems to be a no-brainer for me anyway. And there comes a time when growth can often lead to stagnation if you stay in the cocoon for a little bit too long. And I think given the fact that Bellingham also took on the responsibility of captaining Dortmund on a few occasions, maybe he's come to a stage where he feels as though he probably has done everything he can do with them, and a move back to England, back to his, back home, pun intended, if you will, would benefit him in every way. And I mean, he'd work well with Henderson. Henderson would blood him in perfectly. Milner would do a fine job. The other guys would take to him like a duck to water. And let's also not forget the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahim Konate, who had pretty impressive, remarkable World Cups themselves. Playing with those established legends at a club like Liverpool, which, for all of Borussia Dortmund's excellence, is still sort of a level above. I mean, Liverpool is a level above, of course, and Klopp has, of course, taken Liverpool to a higher level. So I think the Liverpool move might actually be best for him. And besides, do you really want to have a situation where, let's say, for example, Craig, if you have children and one of your children is living so happily and doing quite well in a foreign country, but you miss that child so much, you want to bring that child back home.
Yeah.
I mean, surely there might come a time when that child themselves would feel a little bit homesick, and maybe a move back to England would be the best thing. And under Jurgen Klopp, he'd do fine. I think I'd say that a move to Liverpool would really be the best for him. And there's a reason why Klopp is interested.
It's quite interesting. To be honest, I never thought of it with regards to Klopp and Henderson link as well. But yeah, that's opened my eyes a little bit. I know you mentioned there as well, though, Manny, of course, with regards to if we have the team dotted around international league. So if we look at, Beckham, we had Jonathan Woodgate, of course, at Real Madrid, McManaman at Real Madrid, Lineker was at Barcelona in the past. Sometimes, I do think that it could be a bit of a benefit, though, to the England side, because look at that France team in '98 that won it. A lot of those players were playing in the English league. I don't believe Henry was at that time, was he? He was still at Monaco.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the gel that they had together, and the experiences that they took from playing in the Premier League and other leagues around the world as well. I believe there was some in the Spanish league as well, wasn't there? Eventually, the majority of that team did play in the Premier League at some point, that France team from 1998. But do you feel that somehow benefited that team back then, that France '98 team, having the experience of playing in the Premier League, playing in Spain, rather than just playing in the French league?
I think we've also got to consider, Craig, that most of that squad were also established in the French league. For all of Zidane's mastery and the mastery of several others who were pivotal to France's success, they began their careers in France, established themselves before earning moves abroad. So they pretty much, had that grounding, if you will. With Bellingham, I think he might have had a few years with Birmingham City. I don't quite remember. I'll have to dig up his history. I don't want to, just lead you down a rabbit hole. But my take on Bellingham is that he really didn't have too many years developing in England before he moved to Germany. And obviously the move to Germany was something he had to take. A move to a club like Borussia Dortmund at his age, that was definitely a no-brainer. I mean, he started at Birmingham City. He was in the youth setup for about 9 years, from 2010 to 2019, got into the first team for a season, played 41 games, and then moved to Borussia Dortmund. And let's not forget, he is still only 19. So for Bellingham, that move to Dortmund was his first real taste of life, of footballing life, if you will. Whereas with Zidane, with Patrick Vieira, Emmanuel Petit, Marcel Desailly, Laurent Blanc, more of the established players of the team, they were established in the Ligue 1 system back in France and then moved to clubs abroad. So there you see, yes, there is that dynamic, obviously, of bringing the expertise you gain from your clubs abroad back with the national team, but they already were established back in England. And of course, we all know how established Beckham was before he moved to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
And Steve McManaman is also in the same boat. Woodgate, of course, had his good years with Leeds, being a part of David O'Leary's fledgling bunch, and then somehow secured a move to Real Madrid. Very unfortunate the way his career panned out, but you can see that there's a sort of a difference there. And I just think that you don't really want to have a situation where everyone is completely spread out. And yes, I completely agree that having players playing in different leagues is always going to be advantages, especially if they're playing in the top echelons. But there is a reason, if you take a look at the squad, we don't have too many players who play outside England. I think Bellingham might be the only one. I'm not too sure. I will look that up. But there is that reason. Sometimes that closeness brings that level of chemistry. You see each other very, very frequently without the added pressure of having to take, a flight or, take go across the shuttle across the channel going back to France or Germany or whatever. You see that difference there. And that's one of the reasons why, just to make it a lot easier, most of these players based elsewhere in Europe do eventually come back, especially if they're good enough to continue being in the national team picture. It just makes more sense to, come back home. And I'm sure, Sam, you'll want to say something about this. I want to make sure I bring you in now. Again, I've talked too much.
I think you've wrapped it all up, really, Manny. You always do wrap it up. Literally, you've said exactly what I would say, really. Nothing more to say on that.
I am so sorry.
Don't worry.
That's fine,
I
mate.
like it, honestly.
It's good. But just going back to, of course, the World Cup final yesterday as well. And, it's a fantastic World Cup. Mbappe was on fire. There was something wrong with France again. And I know that there was a virus that was going through the side. To be honest, I've had the horrible bug that's been going around. They haven't said exactly what it was, but I think that had an effect on that team. That was something that I straight away thought when France weren't, because it wasn't just Di Maria had the beating of Dembele all game long, but it wasn't just those sort of players. It was the likes of Griezmann. I don't think Griezmann was particularly very good yesterday. I think Giroud was struggling. And there was something wrong with that French team yesterday. But of course, they did turn it round in the end. And do you think Deschamps thought, right, okay, we're struggling here. These players, I've given them the chance. But do you think he knew or had that nagging doubt that they were ill before throwing them onto that pitch?
I think when it came to the players who were ill, we knew that Rabiot was sick. We knew that Upamecano was sick. And I didn't want to see Upamecano back in the team from a neutral perspective because I thought Ibrahim Konate came in and acquitted himself very well indeed. And let's not forget, France kept a clean sheet against Morocco, despite a lot of reports claiming that Morocco were able to, dominate the French in the midfield and create some chances. That lack of quality in the final third, for the most part, told. And certainly the struggle to get those players back, just marginally fit. I think, again, when it came to the fact that maybe they just couldn't train as effectively as they could, it might have taken its toll on them. But Argentina certainly looked up for it. And here's the deal. It's also the same team which effectively played against Liverpool. That was the same 11 which ended up playing in the final. Of course, Youssouf Fofana and Konate had to drop out for Upamecano and Rabiot to come back in. But I also think that tactically, even with some of the players that were fit, I think Deschamps got it tactically wrong in many ways. He wanted to use that 4-2-3-1 formation, which worked a treat for him throughout the entire tournament. But I think instead of using Tchouaméni a lot more and having Rabiot sort of stay back and try and help out in defense, he wanted Rabiot to be more of that person who would continue to dominate the the sort of more of the central part, go into that opposing half a lot more and try and help out Griezmann, Dembele, and Mbappe, while Tchouaméni had to stay back and defend. Whereas Tchouaméni looked to be a lot more sprightly. And when he had the ball later on the second half, you can see that he was the one who was making the difference. And let's not forget, it was his goal that put them ahead of us in that quarterfinal.
Yep.
And Argentina, of course, deserves some credit. I thought Nahuel Molina did a terrific job in terms of, preventing Mbappe from going too far forward. Rodrigo de Paul and the entire midfield were excellent in terms of choking the supply to Griezmann, Dembele, and Mbappe. And Di Maria literally had Dembele in his pocket, as you quite rightly said. It was just a case of Deschamps getting it tactically wrong. You could see that once Rabiot was forced back and Tchouaméni went forward, it looked a lot better. And obviously, he had to bring off Dembele and Giroud, who, quite frankly, were not so effective. Giroud was looking a little bit isolated up front. Giroud didn't necessarily have a bad game, but he realized that he couldn't, work with that formation. So he had to make it a little bit more, solid. I think they probably sort of transitioned into something like a 4-4-2, if I'm not wrong, because if I'm correct, it was Koeman and Thuram who were brought on. Later on, Kolo Muani was brought on. So you can see that Deschamps had the urgency. And I still maintain, Craig, that if Scaloni had not gone into that conservative shell and taken off Di Maria, they would still have seen it out. Bring on Dybala again for Alvarez, get a third or even a fourth goal, wrap it up with a ribbon and a rosette, and uncork the champagne. But again, if you are too defensive, that's going to be a problem. So Deschamps actually got a little bit lucky tactically in a way that his substitutions worked. And Argentina showed that when, the pressure got to them, when the substitutions were made against them, they simply had no answer. And Scaloni in particular, I was screaming for him to make more substitutions. He took off the wrong person for Marcos Acuna. He should have considered replacing someone like maybe... I mean, I can't think of anyone else who would necessarily have come on, but at least, at that stage of the game, he should have brought on Dybala, whose speed would have, troubled the defense in many ways. But again, he was too passive, he was too conservative, and Deschamps was let off the hook, almost spectacularly. I think it was a question of those fine margins, that sequence of events, which could have ended up deciding everything against Argentina. And so I think on the balance of play, Argentina deserved to win. But going back to your question, yes, the bug might have, affected some of them in many ways. But also, as I've said, tactically, Deschamps made a few mistakes. It was also shown with France losing to Tunisia that he didn't really have too much trust in many of his fringe players to come on and do the job, which is why the likes of Matteo Guendouzi, William Saliba, and a few others would never, ever get a look in the tournament. So the injuries before the tournament didn't help. The whole controversy between Deschamps and Benzema didn't really help, no matter how much Deschamps tried to silence it. And of course, an update is that it is Benzema's birthday, and he has decided to retire from international football, 3 caps short of the magic 100. Sad way for him to leave. Hopefully, if a new coach comes in, he might decide to tempt Benzema back for maybe a few friendlies to get him to that 100, and then finally say au revoir et merci beaucoup and send him on his way. But it just goes to show that it's always important that the manager is able to have full control of his squad, but also knows how to treat some players better. And I think Deschamps, for all of his record as a manager with the French team, has shown that dealing with players is not his strongest suit.
No, and I agree with that, because I was watching, of course, full time. Also, before the penalties, the actual he harks back to like a Neil Warnock type manager. He doesn't mince his words, and he'll say it in front of people. And is that the right way to deal with players nowadays? I think some players probably does, some players it probably doesn't. But one player that I saw getting quite an earful, even though I don't know why, was Tchouaméni. And right at the end of the game, was getting an earful from Deschamps. So it does. I think with Zinedine Zidane, who is rumoured to be taking over, it'll be quite interesting to see what he does and see if he's a little bit more relaxed. Probably not much, but I think it might be a little bit more relaxed than Deschamps, but we'll see. Before we move on to, of course, and off the World Cup, Alexis McAllister, he's not going to be staying at Brighton for very long.
Not at all.
After that, I cannot see it at all. Personally, and it was actually said on the BBC, could he be Messi's replacement, which is unbelievable, really, isn't it, for a player that plays for Brighton?
No. He's a central midfielder, strong in the tackle, provides the solidity. He doesn't necessarily look comfortable on the wing. And to answer your question about Messi's replacement, it would be the number 21, Dybala. He wasn't given any minutes to play in Argentina's first 5 games, but then he came on for 15 minutes at the semi-final with the game more or less done and dusted. But he showed when he came on, he had the ability to get into spaces. He had the vision to, find a pass. He actually had a beautiful chip pass to McAllister, which should have been an assist for a McAllister goal, only for Al Mac to put that wide of Livakovic. Otherwise, Dybala would have had an assist, and I'm sure, if he would have had a role to play in the final. As luck would have it, he was brought on with minutes to go, a la Grealish, except while Grealish didn't have an impact, Dybala did with his penalty. So as far as McAllister is concerned, he's more of a workman-like sort of player.
Mm.
So I'm not too sure that he would necessarily be courted by too many big clubs who will look at his performances throughout the World Cup and say, yes, he was solid. Yes, he showed that he was capable. But is he going to fit into our team and our style of play? I think he's perfectly fitting into the Brighton team and their style of play under De Zerbi. And he's deservedly going to get some more game time and continue to be an important part of their plans. Of course, if the fee being offered is an extremely exorbitant fee, then maybe that would change things. But I think, as with Emi Martinez and some of the other Premiership Argentinian players, they feel happy at their clubs. They feel valued. They know that they're in good places right now. They know that they're going to get some more game time and definitely, improve themselves. So why would they want to leave? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Yeah, definitely. And final thing really on this World Cup. Of course, we've spoken about Morocco. They were the surprise package. They were fantastic. But one team that was completely a letdown was the Belgians. Expected a lot more from them, or did we?
They're all very old, aren't they? Now, most of them, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
They're all coming to the end of their careers. Hazard's already retired, hasn't he? Now, I think. So yeah, I think it's just I think they're always very high in the FIFA standards. I don't always know how the FIFA standards work, but yeah, I don't think it was too much of a surprise. They should have probably played a bit better and got through a bit further, but I definitely wouldn't have said they would have been contenders to win it.
I think Canada, really did put them under the cosh as well for large parts of that game. And Canada really did struggle at this World Cup. For 45 minutes against the Belgians, they looked like they were going to do something. And I think it was quite a sad way to see Eden Hazard's final World Cup. A very talented pool of individuals just absolutely collapse.
Yeah, and there have been some reports, Craig, about how the Belgian squad was also rife with a little bit of infighting and disharmony. And I think when you take a look at Roberto Martinez, how he got the Belgian job will always be a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say that as a manager, if you're able to win an FA Cup but then get relegated in the same season, although there would be some good qualities, the bad qualities will invariably, outweigh the good. So how he got the job is always going to be a mystery to me. I think when he took Belgium to third in the World Cup in 2018, beating us twice in the process, we probably saw that Belgian team at their best when they were playing harmoniously and playing some really good football. They knocked out Brazil as well en route to meeting us in the semis. Coming into the semis, and then they beat us in the playoffs. So that was probably the Belgian team at their best, but there's always going to be this sense, and rightly so, that he failed to truly get the best out of them. They never really looked as though they were going to win any major tournaments. And it's just a question of, I guess, the harmony simply lacking at times. A few players also getting injured before the tournament didn't really help them, but there didn't seem to be the chemistry they had. And certainly when you have a situation where the likes of Alderweireld and Vertonghen are playing and Vermeulen's also, I don't think Vermeulen was involved this time, but I mean, I digress. As you both have said, many of those players have just come to the end of their cycle. There will be more retirements, although the likes of Courtois will stay on. The whole Lukaku thing certainly didn't help them in many ways. And it's as if they just seem to have no real ideas. And let's not forget, you mentioned Canada. If Fonzie Davies had scored that penalty, it would have been Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, happy days. And then Saturday, what a day. You all know that.
Yeah.
But it was just a question of Belgium completely underwhelming. I mean, even a team like Germany played some really good football in patches, but were undone by their complacency against Japan. And, even Spain, aside from that 7-0 win, looked very boring, if not ordinary. But Belgium were a complete letdown. And notwithstanding the fact that the group that they were in saw two of the semi-finalists, they still completely underachieved. And I think now that it's come to the end of the cycle, Martinez is gone. I'm pretty certain that Thierry Henry could also leave his post. So if there is to be a new manager and Zidane were to come in, I'd actually hedge my bets on Thierry Henry coming into the France setup and working with those strikers because, believe you me, Giroud might also leave, and there are some talented strikers, but they're going to need to learn from one of the best.
Yeah, yeah, and I could see that happening. Thierry Henry, being potentially the assistant manager to Zidane, in the France setup. So I think France have got, a good future ahead of them. Hopefully we have as well. But I think this was probably Argentina's key time, key time to win it with Messi, with Di Maria. They're not going to be back for 2026. And I don't think Argentina would get to the final in that next World Cup. They might have some wonder kids that do come through and do, surprise me, but I can't see it somehow. But let's move on. So we've covered off the World Cup. It was a really, really good World Cup, regardless of course, everything that was mentioned beforehand. We shan't go all over it again. But fabulous spectacle, and the football took care of itself. But of course, we have got this game against Newcastle on Tuesday, which, how worried are we about this Carabao Cup now? Oh, should we be focusing and thinking, right, this is a trophy that we could win? Or, I think the priority still has to be staying up.
Yeah, I would say definitely tomorrow. I think we should use it as a game to bring all the players back together. Firstly, I would say play all the youngsters and not worry about it at all. But maybe we should use this game to just get everyone back together, and just try and play some good football. At the end of the day, we want to win every game, of course. But if we lost tomorrow, it wouldn't be the worst thing. If we won tomorrow, we'd go through to the next round. But my main aim is obviously to stay up in the Premier League, and I think that should be the top priority and only priority really this season.
Yeah, completely agree. And then of course we've got Chelsea coming up, but let's scale it back a little bit again because of course Bill Foley has just recently taken over the club, and it's exciting. My interview with Mark McAdam actually spoke to Bill Foley himself, and Bill's ambitions, it all makes sense. He's currently up. Well, it's believed, it's a rumor that's going round on the Vitals forum, is that he is looking at Lorient I believe that's how it's said, in France from Ligue 1. And he will be looking at a Belgian side, but they're going to be feeding into Bournemouth. And it's a position that we never ever thought, of course, we spoke to Trevor Watkins the other day as well. It's a position we never ever thought we'd ever see in our lifetimes at this club, which is, we're still a very small club, but why do you think Bill Foley's even picked us to start off with? That's an interesting one. Why Bournemouth and why not the more established Premier League club? Well, let's take our previous opponents, Everton, for example. It's believed Everton might be up for sale. There's rumours about them, but why us, not them?
I'll let you start, Manny.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I wanted you to start, but here's my 2 cents on it. I think we were talking earlier in another cherry-picking stream about the possibility of Bournemouth, being snapped up and being one of those clubs that could be taken in. And I think it's just fair to say that, the market for all of these big clubs to be taken over by different owners has become a bit saturated, really. Outside the Manchester Cities, the Uniteds, the Arsenals, the Tottenhams, the Chelsea's or what have you, and even Everton as well. Historically, they've been been a club that's achieved a great deal domestically and in Europe, and they have the history to back it up. They've got the stadia as well, and so they also have more of the exposure. A team like Bournemouth, it has its own history for sure, but given that it's spent a great deal of time outside the Premiership and has just come back, there aren't too many people who would necessarily know about them outside the shores of the UK or even Ireland. So it's a way of trying to make sure that the profile will be realised, starting small and building a Newcastle from a smaller foundation and trying making it a little bit bigger. It's a shrewd investment, and I think let's not forget. In addition to Bill Foley, you've also got the help of a Hollywood superstar who will be more heavily involved. So that's going to raise the profile almost immensely. The only issue I have is that both Mr. Foley and Mr. Jordan will start to see that, with a club like Bournemouth, you're not going to expect huge turnovers in terms of more increased fans or increased revenue almost immediately, because a foundation has to be completely built, and crucial to that foundation, as Sam has said, will be staying in the Premier League. So a possible EFL Cup run can wait, unless, of course, Newcastle decide to put on the kids themselves and maybe, put themselves on a hiding to nothing. We don't know, but it's a nice way to sort of sink his teeth into English football, because we're seeing with Arsenal, and I think I might have mentioned this as well, the whole issue with the Kroenkes. With an Indian connection, of course, because I am from an Indian family, there has been talk of Mukesh Ambani, the 10th richest man in the world, possibly launching a bid to buy Arsenal. And he has made it clear that in contrast, instead of Liverpool and Manchester United, Arsenal would be a club he'd like. And of course, in India, there's a huge increasing fan base of people who enjoy watching the Premier League. There was a huge fan base in India supporting Argentina this World Cup, not just in India, but also across the whole Indian subcontinent, Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Everyone was cheering like crazy when Gonzalo Montiel scored that winning penalty, and they were cheering like crazy for other good moments. And for the Premier League clubs as well, Arsenal especially, they would cheer like crazy. So the only problem is Mukesh Ambani will have opposition to buying that from the Kroenkes themselves, who have made it clear that under no circumstances are they interested in selling it, which is why Spotify's owner, Daniel Ek, had no luck trying to buy Arsenal. So instead of trying to enter into that skirmish when it comes to buying big clubs, it's almost a bit like if you played Monopoly when you were much younger, you'll know how difficult it is to buy places in Park Avenue or Mayfair or those high-end places, and you invariably end up starting at Old Kent Road and trying to build your way up. I'm not comparing Bournemouth to Old Kent Road and Monopoly. That would be disrespectful. But it's a nice way to sort of cast that net a bit wider, go to certain areas, not just Bournemouth, but there'll be some other clubs which have history of their own. I mentioned Huddersfield Town certainly has history as being one of the founding clubs of the the English league system. They were league champions 3 years in a row, I believe. Shout out to Ryan Mather from Huddersfield Town Fan TV. Hopefully, if Bournemouth and Huddersfield play, I'll have the two of you work together with him. Work together. That would be a treat. But again, it's like casting the net wider, going to different clubs, trying to make sure that they have their profile increased, but also trying to do something yourself and being willing to at least be patient enough to take the time to build something. And I think it's wonderful that Foley's taken over. It's wonderful that Jordan is involved. It could potentially have a similar effect to Ryan Reynolds and company over at Wrexham.
Yeah.
You never know.
Definitely.
I just think it's really, really exciting because I know you mentioned Old Kent Road and comparing AFC Bournemouth to that. To be honest, once upon a time, you could it would be fair comparison because let's be honest, we were on our knees, and it's that story, that rags to riches story, going from nothing to where we are today. And if you compare, 2008 to 2022, it's a completely different club. I do want to, in a moment, flash something up on the screen, of course. Look at that.
There it is.
There it is. Did we ever
Wow.
imagine that Adonis Creed was going to be there wearing an AFC Bournemouth shirt? Do you know what? That's got to be in the movie somewhere, hasn't it? Surely that has to be in the movie where, Adonis Creed is, doing something, but he's got an AFC Bournemouth shirt on because he is releasing Creed 3 very, very soon.
Probably not in a movie per se, just a photo session to increase publicity. But it's a start. It's a start. It's a start. I mean, you could see him rocking a Bournemouth shirt in one of his films. If he does do a sequel to Creed and rocks that shirt, that would be terrific. But
Yeah.
hey, listen, it's something. I mean, you've got exciting times up ahead, and as long as you've got Creed, you will no longer be in need.
There you go.
Do you know what? I love your sayings, Manny. Absolutely love them. You just do it on the fly as well. You don't actually plan this. I don't plan the questions for these shows. And Manny it comes straight into his head and thinks up something. Honestly, mate, it's brilliant.
Mate, listen, thank you. I mean, look, all those years watching Satan Greavesy and other programs, I've learnt from the best. And I have to say that back in the day, English sporting television was at its finest. With Sky Sports now, the less said, the better, yes?
Fair
Talk
enough.
Sport as well.
But let's just going on to this buyout and what his plans are. So what the ideas that he has. So of course the training ground, bringing in new young players, talented players, training the existing players to be the very, very best. That is already being started. Of course, spoke to Kieran Maguire. There is a loan that is out. That loan, if it's paid off early, could incur a penalty. Whether or not Bill Foley is too bothered about that, might not be. But there's also other things that he wants to do. So raising the profile is one. That is why not just Michael B. Jordan, but Nulla Saka, and he's quite an interesting man. I don't know how much you guys have looked into Nulla Saka, but he actually has a hand in FC Andorra in Spain. If you look at what FC Andorra have done in Spain, it kind of echoes what we've done, but without that investment by Bill Foley. It seems like now what Bill Foley is doing, and maybe he's looked into that story that Nulasaka is involved in. Maybe he's thinking, right, okay, I want to get this club. They've gone on this journey, like FC Andorra have, got themselves to the Premier League. Let's see how far we can push them. And one of the things that we are going to potentially see is the stadium. And the stadium is a big, big thing. I asked Mark McAdam about it, and I've got my own opinions. I'd like to stay at Dean Court. I'm guessing, would you echo that as well, Sam?
I would stay at Dean Court. I would take down the temporary stand and build a proper stand, and then you could fill in gaps, and you could even take stands down and rebuild them if you had to. At the end of the day, I reckon we should stay where we are, buy it all, and go from there.
The challenge, though, is if we outgrow a stadium that we've done that. So we filled in the corners. We've put on another stand. So that stand, the Ted McDougall stand, as it is at the moment, the Ted Shed, that is pulled apart. It doesn't need to be demolished. It is temporary, but permanent stands put in place. That could put that stadium probably up to 15, 20. I know Eddie Mitchell did say that he could have got it a little bit higher than that and had the planning permission for that, never materialized. But the problem is that really what Bill Foley's aims are? And why I'm thinking that, and it's the model that I mentioned with Mark McAdam, the MK Dons model. So you see these clubs, MK Dons are one, Wigan's one, Reading's one. There's plenty others who have got the stadium within a complex, and that complex has got retail outlets. Everton, I believe Bramley Dock is also going to have hotels and casinos and all sorts of things
Okay.
on there that are going to be making Everton money. And I think that's probably what Bill is going to do for us. Would, though, could we do it on Kings Park, that sort of development? Or is this going to be a case he's going to move us to a place maybe even outside the Bournemouth perimeter? Maybe we're close to the dual carriageway as it is at the moment, so the access isn't too bad, albeit the coming into the stadium and out of the stadium at the moment is a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
That's going to be something the council are going to say, but can you see that probably being the route he's going to take? Because I'd love to stay at Dean Court. You know, it's our home. It could be redeveloped. I love the Eddie Mitchell idea.
Yeah.
However, if we're not going to do that, or if there's no extra revenue streams, I can see it being a part of a complex.
Yeah, now you mentioning that, I agree with you totally. A person like Bill Foley would go more of that route and following, for example, Eddie Mitchell's idea. But yeah, it's just how he's going about everything, because I know he obviously said he wants to bring in a few players in January. So let's bring in a few players, keep in the Premier League this season, and then see what else he's got to bring for the club.
How do you think, Manny, this is going to go? Do you think Dean Court, staying at Dean Court, which we love, that ground is unique? Teams don't like going there. You know, if a new Dean Court is built with shiny seats, let's take, I don't really want to, but let's take St Mary's, for example. A nice shiny stadium, lovely changing rooms. The changing rooms at Bournemouth, our changing room is quite nice, but when a Premier League team turns up, the opposition changing room isn't particularly. It's to a standard now. It had to be. It never used to be, as we know, Sam. But it used to be as horrible as possible for them. But teams don't like coming here, and we'll lose part of that identity, I feel, if we do move to this new stadium, this shiny bowl.
I would agree with that. And I do seem to remember saying as well, Craig, that Foley needs to be a little bit careful as to how ambitious he would like to be, because I did mention why he wanted to come to Bournemouth, probably sort of get out of that whole Big Six, Big Eight clubs with their history and everything, and sort of come over to Bournemouth and try and increase their profile. I'd like to think that he would have the sense to know that there would be limits as to how much you can expand, and there is always a danger of expanding a bit too much too soon. I do seem to remember Portsmouth as well. I think are telling you that when they got Harry Redknapp in, he was able to get all those star-studded players, including my former Arsenal players, Sol Campbell, Nwankwo Kanu, Lauren, and can't for the life of me remember who else he brought, but it is what it is.
Habib Diop?
No, he played for Fulham, I think.
No, he did play for Fulham. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. May he rest in peace, by the way.
Yes.
Passed away some time ago.
Yes,
so obviously, when Portsmouth won that FA Cup and got into Europe, they obviously wanted to try and build something big with that. And of course, we all remember Leeds in the early 2000s, touching close to the sky, but then going a little bit too far forward. Of course, Elland Road is a more established stadium, and Fratton Park also has its charms. The dangers of going too far too soon are always evident, and I think what I would like to see him do is make sure that he doesn't take a decision which would really do anything to take away the character of the team. You mentioned how an alternative would be to go outside the Bournemouth perimeter. Personally, mate, if you were to have that situation, you take away a lot of the appeal of that club, because one of the nice things about having a football club stadium in your own locality is that you won't need to hop in your car to drive over there. You can walk
Yeah.
over there. You can take the bus. You can take the bike. It's closer to your own garden, if you will, and you feel a part of that. So having to leave your environs to go out slightly outside to go to a new stadium would really not be the best way forward. It would take something away. Even when we had to leave our beautiful Highbury Stadium with the Art Deco halls and the immaculately designed, facilities, our changing rooms, our saunas and jacuzzis and what have you, we only went about 1 kilometre away to Cashburn Grove, I would say, and Highbury was going to be turned into an apartment complex with the marble halls retained. The turf, of course, was cut up, and one of the stands at the old Highbury Stadium was an existing building which couldn't be knocked down. So you couldn't have a situation where you could expand Highbury even if you tried. If you could expand Dean Court to get some more people and do it strategically so that you can get more people in, that would definitely be a start.
Yeah.
And that is really, I think, the limit that Foley should look to accomplish. Because again, will the club stay in the Premier League? Will you not possibly go on a cup run? Don't underestimate the importance of a cup run, because you've come this far in the EFL Cup. You've certainly come further than my Arsenal and Chelsea, among other teams. So, you just never know what can happen, but it has to be done on a season by season basis.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Foley and Jordan and company just see the season out. It's been a crazy season in many ways, with the World Cup being so disruptive, and obviously some guys will be coming back who might not necessarily be fit. I think you can safely say that with Wales exiting early, Kiefer Moore and Chris Mepham had no injuries and should be able to play in Tuesday's game against Newcastle. So all worked out well. Sad, of course, for former Cherry Nathan Ake, whose Dutch team lost to Argentina. Should mention him as well. But as I said, any further expansion should be done strategically and definitely depending on how well Bournemouth do. And if you're able to pace it that way and do it gradually, it will work. If you try to do too much too soon, it'll land you in trouble. And although Leeds have somehow found a way to overcome those struggles and come back into the Premiership, they are still struggling a little bit, although they should be fine. Portsmouth still. And it's a tragedy because, they're a fine club with a good set of supporters. And I know that Harry is close to your hearts as well as their hearts too.
Yeah.
But, those are cautionary tales. So it's another lesson on how, if you want to, as a foreign owner, come to England and buy up a club, you've got to study that area carefully. You've got to study the club carefully, the history, the character, immerse yourself in it, not just for the sake of PR, but also really, really promise to get yourself involved and really, really find out more and exude that air of honesty. And one thing I can say about people who live in the area and certainly live around those clubs and who are happily involved with them is that if they believe that you are sincere, they're willing to help you out. And I'm sure all you Cherries fans are exactly the same. Because if Foley is able to convince you a lot that he is really sincere and really wants to see the club grow in a positive way, I'm sure you will support him. So it's a question of taking it one day at a time, being patient, step by step, pace by pace. A little patience wins the race.
See, he's done another one now. No, we do love we do love the slogans, but no, it's going to be exciting times. And then, of course, we've got Chelsea just after Boxing Day on the 27th, which we're Chelsea's favourite club to play, I'm sure. It'll be an interesting one. We will have, of course, the previews for the Newcastle, and we will have the Chelsea preview as well. I'm going to admit it now. I was trying to get Jeremy Clarkson on, but he hasn't returned my calls at this moment in time. So.
You're taking the mickey. I know you've read the news. I know you've read what's happened. I know you didn't try to call in.
Believe it or not, I did try and get hold of Jeremy Clarkson on Thursday, but I think it's no go, to be honest. But we'll see. Never know. Probably not the best one though at the moment. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button, all that below this video. Please do let us know what you think of the channel as well, and tell all your mates. Get more to subscribe. Check out the Trevor Watkins interview. We of course did one, Sam, didn't we, with James Hayter, an
We
interview
did indeed.
recently.
Yes, we did.
We have got Charlie Daniels on here as well. We've got Super Charlie Daniels, plus much more. So do hit that like and subscribe button. But thank you, Sam, as always, for coming on.
You're very welcome. Good to see you.
And you as well, mate. And thank you so much, Manny, as well, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. Cherry picking is one of my favourite activities.
Definitely. And to be honest, this is probably going to be the last cherry picking before the new year. So I hope everybody has a lovely Christmas and New Year as well. And we will be back. Just keep your eyes peeled. Subscribe to the channel. It'll tell you when it is on. That's the way to do it, isn't it? And yeah, do let us know if there's any topics you feel that we should discuss. But until the next one, up the cherries. I'll see you then. Thank you for joining us.